appreciate you for listening. Thank you for tuning in, or if you're watching on YouTube, much love to you for the YouTube people. Please don't forget to leave us all the good stuff that everyone else tells you to do. The like, subscribe on the video. If you're listening on your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, smash a star, the like button, 5 stars. Do the thing. It really does help. Thank you for everyone who does that. It really, truly does help. And appreciate it as we try to grow the little podcast that could in this crazy striping industry. So I want to get into today a couple things before the main topic here. And the main topic today is going to be a really good one because the topic is all about your pricing. And if you go on the Facebook groups, you know there's so many questions. How do I price this? How do I price that? And so we're going to talk specifically today about pricing your projects on a per foot basis and why that might not be the best thing. Might be controversial. I have strong opinions about this. I have changed my approach. I used to price everything by the foot or per stall or however you want to call it. But there's some real reasons that you might want to consider why that might not be the most effective method for your business, especially if you're trying to scale it. So we'll talk about that. First though, I'm very excited to announce 2 things. Man, it's been 3 weeks since the last episode came out. I have been busy and I've neglected. I even have my schedule in my calendar for when I'm supposed to record the podcast, and I blew right through the last 2 of them because it has been very crazy, very hectic here. We get snow basically in a couple weeks, so we're trying to crank out as much painting as we can, get things done. So the 2 things that have happened since this podcast has graced your ears or your eyes on YouTube, first and foremost, I teased this during the Instagram Live in the last episode or 2 episodes ago, but I could not be any more excited. I say it a lot, but I'm very excited because I was chosen to speak at National Pavement Expo in 2023. Woo! Very, very excited. So the National Pavement Expo this year is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it is in January of 2023. I don't have the specific dates in front of me here. January 20. You think I would know? I'm speaking at the event. My goodness. January 25th, 26th, 27th. So I applied to be a speaker back in June, I believe, when the openings to apply were open. Fully expected not to be chosen. But I put my best foot forward and talked about what I thought I could try and potentially bring value and help people who were attending the show. So I'm very, very excited to announce that I was chosen. I am super pumped. So my seminar, it will be on the Friday of the NPE. As I'm pulling open all of the info right here. A good podcast host would have done this already. The theme of my speaking event is grow your business with intention. Grow your business with intention. So as you know on this show, that's majority of what we talk about is the business, how to grow it, improve things in the business, specifically for striping. So this seminar is going to talk about not just for striping, but in any small asphalt company, whether you're in asphalt maintenance or striping, how can you grow it? How do you find employees? How do you grow it with intention? So I'm going to talk about 3 very specific things in there. And as we get closer, I'll talk more and more about it. In fact, NPE has encouraged all the speakers to kind of hype it up as we get closer. So if you want more details on that, go check out the National Pavement Expo website, nationalpavementexpo.com. You can get your tickets. The early bird ticket registration is open already. I saw that on Twitter there last week. So you can actually get discount pricing to attend the show. And I'm super excited because it's going to be in Charlotte at the Charlotte Convention Center. It's going to be a very, very good venue. My first time. I was supposed to go in 2020, then COVID happened. Last year I had a couple hiccups in my schedule and I couldn't justify leaving the country at that time. This year it's happening. Well, now I have to be there because I'm going to be on stage on Friday. I look forward to meeting many of you there. If you see me there, come shake my hand. Give me a hug. Would love to meet you guys. Very excited for that. The second thing that I really want to put out there that I'm very excited about, and we put this out on some social media here in the last 2 weeks, but stripeitacademy.com is live. stripeitacademy.com. So I encourage you to check it out. So this has been something that I've been working on for quite a while. I started the first Stripe It Academy, a 12-week group training program, July of 2021. I had a blast with it. The guys loved it. Everyone has found tremendous value from it. I ran the second academy here earlier this year, and this is definitely something that I'm going to be doing more frequently, the 12-week group training academy. So if you go to that website, stripitacademy.com, you'll find out a little bit more info on that. And you will also find out some information on the one-on-one coaching. So there's a whole separate page on the website you can click on to learn about what is business coaching, why would you want to consider it, what kind of value and benefits does it bring you. Both the academy and the coaching are designed to be a return on investment to get you something back. So go check it out. I would really appreciate any feedback on there. Danny and I worked on that in the last few weeks here, getting that website up. I'm pretty happy with it, but I would love some feedback. And there's a forum on there if you want to book a call with me just to get to know more information about it, or if it's a good fit for you and your business. Go check it out, stripitacademy.com. So just for putting it out there, when you go there at the very bottom of the website, you're going to see two deadlines, basically. So the next academy, the group training academy that I'm running, the deadline for registration is November the 4th, 2022. November the 4th. That is basically 2 weeks away. Yeah, it's on a Friday. That is the last day that we will open the registration. We only have 8 people. Like I don't want to take too many. We haven't had more than I think both academies before we had 5 people. So I've capped it at 8. So at this time, as you see on the website, if you go there are still 6 of those 8 seats remaining. So 2 people have already joined. There's 6 seats available left for that academy. The deadline is November the 4th. And then for the coaching clients as well, I talked about this a little bit before. The website correctly says that there are only 3 spots available for one-on-one coaching clients. That's because I don't want to overextend myself. You know, even as we get into the winter season and things slow down a little bit for me, I still don't want to overextend, but I also wanted to make the first 3 clients that do come on for that coaching service would be at a discounted rate. And that's why I put those 3 on there. So go check it out, stripitacademy.com. Let's get into today's topic. Today's topic might be a little bit controversial. This whole idea that I had started as a blog post for the academy, stripitacademy.com. There's one blog post on there kind of talking about how I got started. But the second or third blog post that I'm working on here that is not posted yet, I thought would be a fantastic topic to discuss right here on the podcast and on the YouTube, which is you might be making a mistake quoting your jobs on a per foot or per stall basis. And that might be super controversial because if you go online, you're going to find tons of pricing related topics about pricing things per stall or per foot. And, you know, it's not a bad way to start, honestly, because when you price something on a per stall or per foot basis, it's a simple way of coming up with an equation on how you can be profitable on a job. It's very simple to count parking stalls in a parking lot, whether it's on a drawing, on Google Earth, or if you go on a site visit and count them yourself. So, you know, if you're out there and you calculate your pricing and your estimates based on the number of stalls or the linear feet total, you're basically accomplishing the same thing. So, in my blog post here, I put an example. If somebody, if a parking stall is 20 feet long, if somebody charges $10 to paint a parking stall, that's the same thing as charging 50 cents a foot to paint that parking stall. So whether you're doing it per foot or per stall, you're accomplishing the same thing. And as most people know, with traffic paint, especially on the side of the cans, your manufacturer will always put the coverage rate of traffic paint in 4-inch lines. So it's very different than like your house paint. Typically your house paint says this is how much coverage you can get with a square foot. So if you paint your wall 1 square foot, and they do their coverage that way. With painting, it's different. It's basically a third of a square foot because it's doing it in 4-inch paint lines, which is typically installed. So while it might seem like a simple way of calculating some estimates, it does have some problems. And I don't think many people who have smaller size businesses and aren't actively growing their business aren't really thinking about some of the disadvantages that you might have in quoting things in a per foot or per stall basis. So, one immediate problem that often comes up with new business owners when they start pricing with this method is pretty straightforward. I mean, if you're parking lot has 100 parking stalls and you're 10 bucks a stall, that's easy. You come up with your figure that way. But then the big differentiator in what I've talked with and connecting with people is, are you including the cost of your paint and materials in that per foot price? To me, the idea of putting in your paint totals into a per foot price doesn't make sense. But you'll be surprised online how many people do include paint in their per foot price, and some people don't. So you might have this argument online of how much should I charge per foot, and some guy says 30 cents. Another guy says, well, you'll be lucky to get 35 cents here, or we're up to 70 cents. You might not be comparing the same thing. That's the point I'm trying to make. Some people will include the coverage and the material in that cost per foot, which I don't think is a wise idea personally because of the fluctuations in paint cost. We've all seen that in the last 2 years. But some people don't. So please just keep that in mind, if you're a business owner listening to this and you see those debates online about how much to charge per foot or per stall. People will calculate that very differently. A 20-foot stall, including your paint, is a very different price than a 20-foot stall, not including your paint. But then this is something that I found too when I started in 2018 pricing per foot, and that's how I did it, was you now have to come up with a separate charge for all of your stencils, right? And again, in my journey here, I'm connecting with people who are trying to start a business or grow their business. They have the same dilemma. Like, well, if it's 10 bucks per stall, how much do I charge for a handicap? How much do I charge for a traffic arrow? How much do I charge for a 12-inch stencil? How much do I charge for a 24-inch stencil? What about curbing? Do you charge that separately, or is it per foot? If there's a crosswalk, what if it's a 12-inch crosswalk bar? What if it's a 24-inch crosswalk bar? What if there's stop bars? There's so many things that can go in to, even a restripe of a parking lot, where your per foot price or your per stall price, you'll have to include other costs for those. And again, on the surface, I'm not throwing shade at people who do that. I did that for at least 2 years, probably closer to 3 years, calculating my estimates that way. But you will start to run into the problem as you grow your company. And I'm encouraging, if this is if you're listening to this and you've priced all of your projects to this point on a per foot basis, all I'm asking for is for you to consider the information of why you might want to change your approach. And instead of doing things on a per foot basis, thinking about your estimates more in the context of the time it takes. So what I did is I began to analyze my profitability on projects. And I really started to do that more at the end of 2019 and into the beginning of 2020. I really started analyzing my numbers, like which jobs do I make really good profit margins on? Like which jobs am I charging a decent amount of money, getting them done efficiently, don't have to go back for callbacks or warranties and those sort of things. And I found something really interesting is that my profit margins were kind of all over the place. Some jobs, most of the jobs I was doing had very good margins on them, but I had some variance in there. Some jobs were like 60, 70% gross margins. Some jobs were like upwards of 80, sometimes even 90% gross margins, but I couldn't seem to have any like consistency in my margins. And sometimes my margins would be quite a bit lower as well. So in other words, I was still being profitable on jobs, especially because I had very little overhead and no employees, and I was still making money, but I wasn't getting a consistent baseline for profitability. And so I really started to dig into like, why is this happening? And I started comparing some restripes projects that I would do to other restripe projects and how much time did I spend on them. And what I found is that there were some restripes where I simply took longer than it would take me to do another restripe. Whether that was the condition of the paint, like you couldn't see the paint very well, so you have to spend extra time to lay things out, make sure everything's are good, maybe snap chalk lines up for your baselines. If I had to travel farther to a job, some jobs were farther away, some were closer. If my stencils that I had didn't match the existing ones on the ground, now I had additional time to either grind it off or add some black paint and black it out. A number of other factors too, right? And I don't think that's revolutionary. Like no two painting jobs are the same. Just because you go to paint one shopping mall doesn't mean, of say 500 stalls, does not mean that the other shopping mall across the street which is also 500 stalls, is going to take the same amount of time because there's so many other factors that go into how long does it take to get that specific job done. You know, is there issues with parking, cars being parked in the way? Do you have to mobilize multiple times? So all these things kind of factor in to a successful restripe in deciding, or not deciding, but ultimately what your profit margins will be in the end. So it became clear to me as I started, digging into it, that simply putting a per foot price on my restripes wasn't really cutting it. It wasn't giving me consistent profitability. So I knew this has nothing to do with my materials, because I personally, if I charged 50 cents a foot or 30 cents a foot or whatever I was charging, I would always include my materials separately. So I was basically treating my per foot price as labor only. So I knew it had nothing to do with my material prices. And I did the same exercise, actually, guys, of analyzing my numbers with new layouts. And that's where I found even more variance. And interestingly enough, I was far less profitable on doing new layout jobs than I was doing restripes. This is very interesting when you think about that, because new layouts are obviously more complex. I knew they took more time, but even just the complexity itself, you'd think would lend itself to being more profitable, because there's layout involved and making sure everything's aligned. And I'm sure we've all been to jobs where parking lots are not laid out square, or the concrete that is supposed to be done straight is poured like this, and it messes up all your stall measurements. So there was so much variance that I had in my new layouts. So what I was doing for my pricing in new layouts was basically taking my per foot price, and either at the very least I was doubling it for a new layout. If I knew it was going to be more of a complex layout, sometimes I would go even higher, 2.5, 3 times. So if I was, just for an example, I don't remember my actual numbers, but if I was 50 cents a foot to restripe, I'd be at least $1 for a new layout. And I quickly discovered that I had a lot of variance in my restripes, but my profit margins were definitely all over the place, up and down on my new layouts. And as I was writing this for the blog post, if you were given a new layout of 80 parking stalls, I put this in the blog post. If you get a new layout of 80 parking stalls in a totally square parking lot, and all you have to do is basically paint 2 rows of 40 stalls, right, in straight lines, that's easy. That's super easy. If you have a Graco auto layout and a good way of stabilizing your baselines, you could basically do an 80 stall layout by yourself in an hour. Like from the time you unload from the trailer, get out, take the measurements, drop your auto layout dots on one side, do the same on the other, connect them, and then paint them. That might be an hour, right? But an 80 stall new layout that involves, multiple angles, maybe you've got angled parking, if there's like hashed lines, radiused corners, or even if you're given a drawing that doesn't really have good dimensions on it and you kind of have to figure out a lot of the angles as you go, that same 80 stalls might take you way longer, like 3, 4, 5, 6 hours maybe, if you have to do a lot of checking and angles and calculations, compared to the 1 hour it took you for the 80 stalls of just straight row parking. And so that's what I'm encouraging you guys out there to start thinking about. If you haven't done the exercise, go pull up the numbers on 5, pick them at random, 5 random restripe jobs that you've done, and do the same thing for new layouts. Pick 5 new layout jobs, and then actually go make a little spreadsheet or report and go through the numbers of how long did it take you to do the job? Was it just you? Was there an employee? So basically keep track of the time. How much material did you use? And, guys, I say this saying hopefully you're keeping track of this stuff somehow, whether it's through your invoicing software, QuickBooks, if you're keeping track of your inventory. I mean, I'm encouraging you to definitely have a way of keeping track of that time. Please don't just get in the habit of going to a job and just writing the invoice and sending it. Keep track of your time. Right. So if you can do that, keep track of your time and go through 5 random projects, you're going to find some variance in which jobs were profitable. Maybe you had one job where you did super well. Your gross profit margins after you paid an employee and your materials, or you paid yourself, it might be like 80 to 90%, but some jobs might be a lot lower, like 50%. And that's what I'm encouraging you guys to think about when it comes to your estimating. I don't think you can consistently and successfully have the same profit margins by simply pricing on a per foot basis. Even myself, like I would get new layout drawings and I knew it'd be complicated. Like I could see angled parking. And so sometimes I would do more than double my restripe price. Like instead of doing, if a restripe was 50 cents, my new layouts was $1. Sometimes I look at it and go, this is going to be really hard. I'm going to charge $2 a foot for this new layout. Even doing that, think about what you're trying to accomplish by doing that. And I don't think I was the only person. I've never actually asked anyone this, but I doubt I'm the only person who increased their per foot price on more complex projects, because it's going to be a pain in the butt. Whether it's the layout or that the general contractor you're going to have issues with and you're probably going to have to mobilize multiple times, however you keep track of it. You're probably having jobs where you've intentionally raised your price because you're going to need to. What you're really trying to accomplish with that is to keep track of your time. That's why you increased your per foot price or your per stall price. It's not because I don't like this contractor, so I'm just going to charge them double. It's I don't like this contractor because they make me go slower. It takes me longer to do the job. Therefore, I will charge them more money. And so essentially what you're trying to do by increasing your pricing on new layouts, or if you increase your per foot price over seal coat, which I know is popular with a lot of people because of the time involved, you're trying to account for the time. That's the goal of what you're trying to do. I would encourage you to start thinking about your estimates in the terms of labor rates rather than per foot pricing. So what does that mean? I'm going to stick pretty close to what I've written here in the blog because, I want to make sure I relay this as accurately as possible here. But what really matters, and I'm sure, any business owner would agree, what matters is the profitability in your jobs and how much time are you spending relative to what you're charging rather than the per foot price, right? So when you see spats online of like, I'm 60 cents a foot, well, I'm 70, so I get more money than you. Well, do you? Because if your 70 cents per foot are more complex and you're taking more time than somebody who is charging 60 cents, you're losing, right? It's entirely possible that someone in your very market has cheaper pricing than you, but is still more profitable because they're getting things done quicker. That is way more important than how much do I charge per foot. And I take this approach, I don't want to get too far off track, but I take this approach even with commercial estimates. General contractors do not always select the lowest price on a job. So when you fill out bid forms and price per stall or price per foot, and sometimes you have to do that on a bid form, especially like a municipal job, there's no guarantee the general contractor will always pick the lowest price one, because sometimes they know that they will get more value by having somebody who's more experienced or has a better proposal put together. Anyways, what I'm trying to encourage you guys to think about is labor rates and the time involved in striping. So as I wrote here, like I decided that I needed to change my approach to how I was quoting. I was going to decide what is my time worth on a job site per hour. So what do I want to pay myself? Like if I was an employee of this business, what do I want to pay myself on my paycheck? And how much am I going to charge myself out on a job site? So this is no different than electrician, plumbers, carpenters. An electrician who shows up at your house might get paid $30 an hour, but when you get an invoice, you see journeyman electrician, $90 an hour, right? So they're charging themselves out at $90. That technician takes home $30 an hour. And that's what I would encourage you guys to think about with your striping. This is especially important if you're an owner operator and you don't have employees. It's very easy to start thinking about, the jobs that you do in the terms of profitability without calculating your own income. And what I mean by that is, like, I used to do this. I would do $1,000 job by myself and I'd go, cool, I spent $100 in paint, or let's say I spent $80 in paint and then $20 for some fuel and getting the truck to the job site, equipment fuel. Maybe I used like $10 worth of rope or chalk or tape or I don't know, something. Basically, I spent $100 on that job. And I would think about that in the terms of, well, I charged $1,000. I only had to spend $100. I made $900 on this job. That's great. You didn't make $900 on that job. Unless you're not paying yourself and you're literally working for free, you did not make money on that job. Now, if that $1,000 that you collect goes into your personal bank account, you still did not make $900 because there is a distinction between how much money you make and the company makes. I'm a big believer in that. And so I would do that. I would do that $1,000 job and think, I made $900. I was not factoring in what do I want to make for myself as a single owner operator? What do I want to take home from the business? And what is my time worth on a job site? Because your time on a job site with a piece of equipment is well more than what you should be getting paid for to do that job. So if you say to yourself, I'm the business owner, I'm the best striper in this company, even if there's only 1 or 2 people in the company, I want to make $50 an hour. $50 an hour is pretty good, right? So if you're going to make $50 an hour of personal income, how much are you going to charge out yourself on a job site to a customer? Even if they don't see that breakdown on your invoice, like one technician at $150 an hour for 10 hours equals $1,500, you don't have to break it out like that. But I'm encouraging you to start thinking in those terms. It will allow you to get more predictable profit margins on your jobs. So doing this approach from switching from per foot to instead doing your estimates on how much time will it take. So what that might look like is instead of going to a job and saying, well, there's 10,000 feet, I'm 50 cents a foot, so that's going to be $5,000. Let's make it really simple. Add, $500 for paint maybe. Let's say 1,000 to make it a round number. So you're in it for $5,000 because it's 50 cents a foot, 10,000 feet. Let's say you add $1,000 for paint. So you're in it for $6,000 and you send this estimate in for $6,000. I'm not telling you to change your pricing. What I'm encouraging you to think about is, can you come up with a labor rate for yourself that would equal the amount of time that you think it would take that gets you to that $5,000? So maybe you say to yourself, I'm worth, with my piece of equipment and myself on a job site, I'm worth $150 an hour, right? So if you divide that $5,000 that you came up with by doing 50 cents per square foot, and you decide I'm worth $150 an hour to charge out on a job site, that works out to 33 hours. 33 hours on a job site. That is a lot of time. That's almost, you could do that in 3 really long shifts, I guess. But there's a good chance you're not doing that job, that, $6,000 job in 3 nights. You're probably doing that a little bit quicker. Or maybe you are. Maybe it's a complex job. But at least it starts to get you to think about yourself in the terms of time. Now, there's other things that you need to put into the equation if you're going to put your pricing this way. The easiest way to explain it is like this. When you start a business and you're just a single owner operator, let's make it really simple. You have no employees. You have to have a truck. You have to have a trailer, or in other words, some way of transporting equipment to a job site. You have to travel mileage, which requires wear and tear to your truck, wear and tear to your trailer, and it's also going to cost fuel to get to that job site. Then you get to the job site and you're going to use a piece of equipment that you've paid for, but also requires repair and maintenance. That piece of equipment also doesn't last forever. It depreciates in time. That's part of your expense as well. You use equipment fuel on the job site. Maybe if you are going to work out of town, you now have to keep track of hotels and paying yourself that. So simply coming up with a labor rate for yourself of $150 an hour or $80 an hour or $5 million an hour, it doesn't matter, because you still need to keep track of other expenses that come up in the job. Now that might seem really intimidating. Like, okay, I have a truck and I insure it, but I don't know how much my truck is worth over every time it goes out. Is it $20? Is it $50? Figuring out your rates for your equipment and your assets when you go out to jobs takes a lot of time. And truth be told, 100% transparency, my numbers in my company, which does over $1 million, are not 100% correct. We actually, when we build our estimates, it comes to the customer as a lump sum cost, but broken out in our accounting software, I can clearly see I expect to send a senior technician to this job site for 12 hours, a helper for 12 hours. We have a day rate for our truck, a day rate for every single piece of painting equipment that goes out. We estimate how much equipment fuel we're going to use, the mileage that we're going to go to a job site, and then we put our paint and material costs on there as well. We even have a line item in our bundles that our customer doesn't see for like incidental expenses, like supplies and materials like your chalk, rope, things that you replace with over time. And I compile all of that into one lump sum estimate and then give that estimate to the customer. Getting those labor rates for yourself or employees or your truck rate, it takes time. You basically need to enlist the help of an accountant and go back over a fiscal year or a calendar year and figure out how much that you've spent to keep that truck in operation, your Graco line painting machine in operation, your mileage that you spend. That takes a lot of work. But I think that a lot of work scares a lot of people and business owners from pricing their projects that way. So I wrote this in the blog post too here. A good example with a piece of painting equipment is if you buy a brand new Graco line painting piece of equipment. Here we go here. I was trying to find it. You go buy a brand new Graco 3900. And for the sake of round numbers, I know American, Canadian dollar conversion, whatever. Let's say it's $10,000. Okay. You buy yourself a $10,000 line painting machine. Let's say you start a company by buying a $10,000 line painting machine. Congratulations, you own a line painting machine. But on paper, your company is negative $10,000. The net worth of the company, from a cash perspective, you've now spent $10,000. You now have an asset that brand new is worth $10,000. Now, obviously, you're going to use this Graco line painting machine to produce revenue. However, over the lifespan of that Graco 3900, you're going to put money into it. You're going to break cables. Your tires are going to wear out. You're going to have to do oil changes and flush the hydraulic fluid. I'm trying to think of everything else that have recently broke on our machines. Anything on your machine can break. That's normal, right? Wear and tear. And so what accountants and successful business owners typically do with equipment is they calculate, I expect to have this piece of equipment in service for 5 years. That's the lifespan of the equipment. So let's say you did that with your Graco 3900. You buy this machine, you say, I'm going to have this machine for 5 years. Now, off the record, Graco machines and even Titan are incredibly well built, and you can keep a machine going much longer than 5 years with a good maintenance program. There's people online, talk to Jim Panzanegen. He knows how long you can keep Graco machines going. You can keep those machines going a long time. But let's say that you expect to use it reasonably for only 5 years. If you go longer, that's great. In fact, good businesses have strong preventative maintenance programs to extend the life of their equipment so that they're not constantly chucking money at new equipment. Well, let's say it's going to cost you that $10,000 over 5 years. That's $2,000 a year that you're spending to have that piece of equipment. Right then and there, you have the starting point for what your day rate should be for that equipment. If you do 100 projects a year and it's going to cost you $2,000, well, now you can, oh my goodness, I'm trying to do math in the middle of a podcast. $2,000 a year, right? Because you expect to have this machine for 5 years and we said it's $10,000. Let's say I'm going to do 100 painting projects this year. That $2,000 at 100 projects means every time you go to a painting project, it's worth $20 of expense to that machine. But again, you now have to factor everything else. You have to factor in repairs and maintenance. Your machine cost is going to depreciate over time. So as you start building a strong bookkeeping and accounting system in your business, which I strongly encourage you to do, you'll be able to go back and say, man, we actually spent, in year one, we had to spend, an extra $400 in repairs and maintenance. We did some oil changes. We had to replace a cable that broke, new spray tips, whatever you have to do. So now that $2,000 is $2,400. If you still do 100 projects a year, that's now costing you $24 every project. If you can think about your equipment and your estimates in this way, like this is what it's costing me to have this Graco 3900 with, insurance. I didn't even put insurance in there. If you insure your equipment, expenses related to repair and maintenance, depreciation, you might quickly realize that, man, every time I go out, every project I do, if I do 100 projects this year with this one Graco 3900, I need to charge out at least 40, 50 bucks a day every time it goes out, just to recoup the cost that you spent to have that equipment. If that didn't make sense to you, well, I hope I did a good job explaining it, but seriously, go back and rewind to what I just said and really start thinking about that. That $10,000 machine will make you a lot of money, but it's also going to cost you money. And every year it's going to cost you, maybe in the first year it only costs you $2,200. But as that equipment gets older, you're going to need more and more maintenance. So maybe one year it costs you $3,000 between the expected depreciation, right? We expected to have this machine for 5 years. Now you need to do additional repairs. Now you got more complicated things. Start thinking about that with your equipment, with your truck. It's no different with a truck. It's the same concept. We lease all of our trucks, which makes the accounting super easy, our service trucks, because we just take our lease payment and we know I'm going to spend $1,000 every month on this truck. Super easy. But you also have to factor in, insurance for that truck. And again, repairs, maintenance, oil changes, things like that. If you take a full year's worth of data, you might realize that, yeah, my lease payment on that truck is $1,000, but after I do all the insurance and the maintenance and the fuel, it might cost me closer to like $2,000, right? And so again, same thing. If you do $2,000 and divide that by how many projects you do, again, every project, your truck needs to account for at least $20. In fact, your truck charges are probably going to be a lot more than your Graco equipment because they're worth more, right? Is your brain melted? If so, don't worry. I'm putting this all in a blog post in Stripe It Academy. It'll be up next week. But this is the journey that I went through with my pricing. And I'm going to put it in just simple terms, wrap this all up, spank it on the bottom so we can wrap this episode up. I was thinking in terms of per foot pricing because I was indirectly trying to account for all of the costs that I just blabbled about, which is fuel and insurance and your general insurance. And if you rent a shop and you're employed, I was trying to account for all of that in my per foot pricing. But a simple per foot price and just giving it to a customer does not solve that problem accurately. You might guess and you might be close. You might be good at it. And you might even, again, as we talked about, you might even adjust your per foot pricing on more complex projects because you know it's going to take more time. But that's not going to actually give you accurate, consistent estimates with consistent profit margins, which, to put it simply, your goal as the business owner is to maximize your profit margins. End of story. It's not to be the best per foot price, the most expensive per foot price. It's not. Somebody who's $1 per foot and you're $1.30 might be wiping the floor with you on a profitability standpoint if they run a better business, if they look after their equipment properly. And that's how we get into, the meta of all the expenses and how you can prolong equipment becomes super important, right? So in the blog post, I gave a simple example just to kind of explain this in a different way, right? Well, two things. I want to point out first and foremost, I come from an oil and gas town originally, and it is not uncommon in those industries. If you got an invoice from like a welding truck, they would actually put on their invoice welding truck day rate $150. And if you hired that truck and he did a job for 3 days, you knew that you got quantity 3, truck rate 150. You were charged $450 just for that guy to have that truck and show up at the job, in addition to his labor rate, right? So his labor rate might be lower. It might be like a welder's $90 an hour, but he's accounting for the cost of his truck and passing that on to customers. Whether you decide to show that on your invoices and your estimates is entirely up to you, your accountant, and your tax laws. You might be in a place where you should be breaking out your labor and materials and all those costs separately. But this is not uncommon. Many industries do this. A technician rate is very common. A journeyman electrician, a helper electrician, an apprentice electrician will have different labor rates on an invoice given to a residential client. This is very common. So whether you decide to show that on your invoice is entirely up to you. But this is what I wanted to get to explain this more simply is nearly every business operates this way. And in the blog post, I put the example of a fitness center. When you go to a gym and you pay a monthly rate and they say, hey, you want to come to our gym? It's $50 a month. Cool. You give them your credit card. They charge you every month. On the first of every month, you're getting charged $50. That's all you know. You get $50 charged. You get this tag that you get to swipe in. You can go to the gym whenever you want. That's the arrangement. It's simple. You don't see as the customer of that gym why they're charging you $50. You don't know why they came up with that rate. All you know is that it costs $50 to get into that gym. That fitness center did not charge $50 because they felt like it. And even more important, oh my goodness, in the context of this industry, in Facebook groups and how much should I charge and what would you charge for this job? A fitness center most certainly did not go to other gyms and say, oh, you're $55? Cool, we'll be $50. Does that factor into their thought process when they set their gym rates for you? Yes, they obviously are aware of their competitors' per monthly pricing, and if they're lower, that's a perk. They can advertise our pricing is lower than Bob's gym down the street. But they do not set that price because they felt like it or because this is the going rate in the market. What they need to do is every single piece of fitness equipment in that gym, the treadmills, the ellipticals, the rowing machines, the free weights, the dumbbells, the barbells, everything in there, when they buy it, has a lifespan. They might spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to open up a brand new gym, but they're also going to know we expect to have those dumbbells for 5 years or 7 years. We expect to have those ellipticals for 6 years. We expect that rowing machine to last 10 because the manufacturer says it will last 10 years. Therefore, we can expect this $5,000 machine to cost us $500 a year. What they do is they take all of those things that's going to cost them money and they pass that cost on to you, plus add a little extra for their profit. It's that simple. How much is this gym going to cost me when I buy all the equipment, repairs and maintenance, pay my employees? Obviously you got to pay for a space. You probably rent a space. You got to pay for the lights and the heat and all that stuff. They calculate all of that and figure if we have 2,000 gym memberships out, that's our goal. If we get 2,000 gym memberships out, what do we charge people to recoup all of that money back, plus make a nice profit margin on there? Maybe your net profit, an ideal net profit in a company is at least 10%, right? And in fact, in contracting, it can typically be higher, maybe 15, 20, 25, 30% net profit. That means at the end of the year, that gym, after they've paid all of their equipment expenses, the depreciation on it, they've paid their employees, they've kept the lights on, they've paid the landlord, they sold stuff in the gym, they paid for all the products for the protein powders. Are they left with profit at the end of the year? They calculate all of that and then pass that $50 price onto you and give you your gym tag. Start thinking about your striping business in the same way. Don't just pick a per foot price. And again, I have to be careful here. I would encourage you to strongly encourage you to begin to think and maybe start doing your estimates on a labor basis rather than a per foot basis. I'm not saying that you can't succeed with a per foot pricing. You probably can. In fact, there's somebody listening right now, I'm sure, that's been doing this for 20 years on doing per foot or per stall pricing, and they think, you're wrong, I'm very profitable. Yes, you can be very profitable, but you're going to have a harder time scaling as you try to reverse engineer your costs into why did you set that labor rate? Why did you set a per foot price of 65 cents? When the costs went up this year with fuel, everyone in North America, costs went up with fuel. Paint costs went up tremendously. The cost of Graco machines went up more. Your truck insurance probably went up more. Why did you decide to raise your rate from 65 cents to 70 cents? Did you do it because you just knew that you needed to charge more? Or did you actually have a system of, I think we need to raise our prices by 5 cents per foot in order to recoup that? If you have that and you've reverse engineered that, wonderful. keep going with per stall pricing. But I'm willing to bet that the majority of companies who are pricing their projects on a per foot or per stall basis are not accurately keeping track of their costs, and they might be better served switching to the method of labor rates and actual expenses directly related to the cost of your business and your projects. Woo! If that freaks you out, simple suggestion, try this. On your next 5 jobs that you estimate, your restripes, do your normal method. If you're a per foot person, do the same thing. Say, this job is 10,000 feet. I'm 50 cents a foot. Therefore, it's going to be, $5,000, right? Do that. But before you send that estimate out, I want you to try and do the same thing with a labor rate and trying to keep track of your costs for your truck and your equipment, your Graco painting machine. You might not know what to charge as a day rate for your truck yet. That's okay. It's going to take time. Again, as I said earlier, full transparency, we have a truck rate. So if I send guys out to a 3-day project up north, I account for 3 days of that truck being used, and 4 if it's going to be a 4th day for travel. I set a labor rate, a truck rate per day for that's not entirely 100% accurate. It will be adjusted every fiscal year as we go back and see, okay, this is how much it cost us to run this truck. Here's how many projects we did. We can now figure it out accurately. Just because you don't have it 100% accurately shouldn't stop you from starting. So do your normal 50 cents per foot, but on a whole separate page or paper, hopefully it's not paper, spreadsheet or internal estimate in your software. Create some sort of labor rate for a technician, for a helper. Maybe you have like a junior technician, a senior technician, however you want to break it out. Come up with a rate for your truck, your equipment. If you want to, you could break out your trailer separately, like my trailer cost. It's $10 a day for every time my cargo trailer goes out. And then add your paint costs on top of that and try and get those 2 estimates to balance. So if your one estimate on a per foot was $5,000, let's say you add $500 for paint, try and get your second estimate to do the same. $5,000 in costs with $500 for paint. Adjust your labor rates. So if you think, and this is the most important thing here, if you think that $5,000 restripe job is going to take you 20 hours, then put 20 hours into, whether it's just yourself, a senior technician, or if you're going with a helper, or if you're sending out 2 other guys, 20 hours per guy. If you think 2 guys are going to be on that job site, give them 20 hours for one guy, 20 hours for the second guy, assign them a labor rate, and try and get the 2 estimates that you've created to balance, right? So you can still go with your per foot pricing, but challenge yourself to see if you can put an estimate together that has all of those rates, even though they won't be accurate. And that way you can start to kind of analyze at the end of that $5,000 restripe job, hey, I'm 50 cents a foot. Here's how much time I spent on the job. But on my second estimate, the one, where I did this labor rate thing that Cam was talking about, our guys were actually on site for 22 hours, or even better, our guys were only there for 12 hours. That's great. If you quoted 2 guys at 20 hours each and they got the whole job done in one long day, 12 hours, even better. Now you can start to adjust your labor rates a little bit and or your equipment rates to try and get to that system. And if you do this over time and you keep track of your expenses and you have a strong bookkeeper, guys, this whole episode is completely moot if you don't have a good bookkeeper or an accountant or some sort of accounting system where you can actually go back and look at the expenses related to your truck or your equipment. You can start to go back over time and then reverse engineer those costs. An accountant will help you do this, and you will get more accurate pricing. Whew. Last thing I'll say, there's a lot of resources out there like books, YouTube, instructional videos. Accountants is the most important one that go into the nuances of like, how do I actually set my pricing in a business? Guys, jumping online and seeing what labor rates are in Kentucky is not going to help you in Alberta, Canada. Okay. Yes, when you first get going, start with a per foot price is no problem. When you're a brand new business, you don't have a ton of expenses, but use some resources to try and gain more information and understanding as the business owner as to why your pricing is that way. And if you do make this switch that I've made a year and a half ago, I can 100% tell you with full confidence, the best thing that I could have done was make that switch. Because now we get more consistent profit margins. You know, it's so nice at the end of a job where I thought it was going to take us 40 hours. I can go back and see, why did it take us 54? Like, what did I estimate wrong? Did something happen in the field? You know, it might not be you estimated wrong. Maybe you have a weakness in the field operationally, like, you know, whether it's guys slacking off or they're not following a procedure correctly, right? This whole process of getting more accurate estimates lends itself to gaining you more information on how to run a better business. Woo! That was a heavy episode, guys. Thank you for listening. In the Stripe It Academy, I'm going to pull a plug here. In the Academy, we talk a lot about knowing your numbers. In fact, the entire third week is about knowing your numbers. And in that week, we go through some of the key metrics that you can start tracking right now that are not hard, so that you can begin to compile that information that we talked about in today's episode and what you do with that information. There's 5 key metrics that I'm a huge believer in that we go through in that Academy week. And then that lends itself really nice to week 4 in the Academy, which is all about pricing your projects. That's such an area of concern for business owners. Am I pricing my projects correctly? I get asked that question a lot. Hey, Camp, like, how do I know if this is right? Does this bid look good to you? This Academy will help you with that. So again, shameless plug, if you go to stripeitacademy.com, all the information on the Academy is there, on the coaching program is there. The deadline is November the 4th. There are still 6 seats remaining for that Academy, and there are still 3 client spots remaining for one-on-one coaching. That's it. That was long. Keep your stripes hot. Thank you for listening. I will talk to you next week.